become better and yield more joint answers if we start by recognizing that we already have grave loss and damage today, and particularly vulnerable countries are particularly dependent on international support to address such loss and damage. After Sharm el-Sheikh, before Dubai, we've been working hard, and with the participation of Germany and vulnerable countries, we have developed a proposal for the establishment of a new loss and damage fund. The result of this 1 year of negotiations has been approved at the very beginning of the conference, and that's the first tangible success of this climate conference. I believe that this commitment to reach agreement right at the beginning is very encouraging, and I'm confident that further progress will follow. Loss and damage is fundamentally about answers to 3 questions. Where will the money come from? Where will the money go? And how can it be used as wisely as possible? The question where the money will be coming from has been partly answered in Dubai, namely, not just from traditional industrialized countries, but also, for example, from the United Arab Emirates, a country which, according to the outdated logic of the Framework Convention on Climate Change, is not an industrialized country. Germany and the United Arab Emirates made an agreement prior to the conference, and as you know, both countries immediately pledged $100 million each for the new fund, because we believe that this agreement was the right thing, and we want to make this conference a success in every respect. And again, this was about building bridges and reaching out. This time, reaching out between traditional donors and new non-traditional donors. Further donors have followed suit, and further donors will join the effort too, from all parts of the world. And that is one first success of this conference, that all countries are called upon to stand in solidarity and provide support against loss and damage. And the old division into the small group of countries that were already industrialized countries in 1992 and the many others is finally being overcome. Of course, the duty of industrialized countries remains to lead the way on establishing the fund, but the world has really changed since 1992. The economic performance and the emissions of quite a few countries that were still considered developing countries then have risen considerably, and they can afford to shoulder their share of responsibility for global loss and damage. So, this decision right at the beginning of the COP has opened doors for new donors, and as far as I'm concerned, it should also open the door for totally new, innovative sources of finance, for instance, new global taxation of maritime transport. Because in view of the dimension of the task, traditional development budgets will never be enough. The international community will have to embark on new avenues and open up new sources of funding. The question of where the money will go will be determined by the new fund's board, which means jointly by the industrialized and developing countries. We already laid down that priority should be given to countries that are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. A minimum floor that is yet to be defined is to be devoted to the least developed countries and small island developing states, which are particularly affected. And the question of how to use the money wisely has also been answered in terms of the first few fundamentals. The fund is to become a learning institution that creates maximum impact for better addressing loss and damage. We are ready to share the experience we have already made with the Global Shield Against Climate Risks so that the fund will become able quickly to deliver impact on the ground. Ghana, as a pathfinder country under the Global Shield and as chair of the V20, can play a key role for the transfer of knowledge in this regard. The Global Shield will continue to act in paving the way for these efforts in the concert of global efforts against loss and damage, like many other institutions that address the consequences of natural disasters. And the decision taken by the climate conference expressly welcomes that. Good interaction and coordination will be vital. From my experience with the Shield, three principles stand out that I think is important for the future work of the fund. First, country ownership. This is not about providing a substitute for government action. It's about strengthening government action and supporting countries' own national efforts. Second, the focus must be on policies and not just on projects. The dimension of loss and damage is so broad now that local answers are not enough. You need large-scale systems that anticipate risks, provide early warning, and are activated as early as possible so they can still limit the damage. So, say a flood is coming. The social protection system will not just send a warning, but also some money to the mobile phone of, say, a woman smallholder. So she is able to bring her cattle to safety, and that small amount of money can make a big difference by keeping her from having to give up livestock farming and falling into poverty. And third, it is vital for us to invest in solutions that limit loss and damage in such a way that the country will be better prepared for the next climate-induced damage. For instance, through drought-adapted agriculture or early warning systems that help people to save themselves and their assets in time. Ladies and gentlemen, if we do not manage to make headway on adaptation to climate change, climate-related loss and damage will reach unaffordable levels. And if we do not manage to stop greenhouse gas emissions, adaptation will become impossible at some point. This means that all topics of this conference are interlinked. But looking at it from a positive angle, precisely because so many things are interlinked, the progress we have made gives us hope that we will also make progress in other areas. The Development Ministry will certainly do everything it can to support the energy transition in our partner countries, forest conservation, and smart adaptation to climate change. This afternoon, for instance, I will have a discussion with Senegal and unions on how to make the energy transition just. Let me close by expressing some thanks. You all know that these are difficult times internationally. Divisions are becoming deeper, not least because of the conflict in the Middle East. This means all the more that the climate conference is a chance for us to return to cooperation mode, because challenges in the world are so big that we can only meet them by working together internationally. We have these conferences at which all countries in the world try to resolve shared challenges peacefully by talking to each other. If these conferences didn't exist, you'd have to invent them. So, notwithstanding all difficulties, I'm very grateful that these climate conferences exist. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister. Dr. Kokofu.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. It is very true. Last year in Sharm el-Sheikh, together we were there for this Global Shield launching. Let me take the opportunity to give a brief background about the CVF and the V20. The CVF is Climate Vulnerable Forum that comprises about 68 countries, representing about 1.6 billion people across the globe. Africa, Caribbean, Middle East, Pacific, and all of you. These countries share common identity of vulnerability when it comes to climate catastrophes. The V20 are the finance ministers that represent these countries. And the chair is the finance minister of Ghana. And we have the privilege of also hosting the chairmanship of the CVF in the person of President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo of Ghana, and myself, the presidential special envoy. Having said all that, it is also necessary to say that 98% financial and social gap exists within these CVF and V20 economies. Our research shows that over the last decades, the V20 collectively lost over $500 billion due to climate change. In other words, our people would have been 20% wealthier had it not been for climate change. And in simple terms, I can illustrate. Ghana may borrow $10 million from Germany to construct, say, 1 kilometer of road, and the loan will come with interest and will add on to Ghana's debt burden. The road may be projected to, say, last for 20 to 30 years. But after constructing the road, within a month or two, there will be flooding and everything will be washed away. There's nothing to show. No more, the infrastructure will not be there, but the debt will be there, plus the interest. That is what we're talking about when we talk about loss and damage. It adds to your debt portfolio and further impoverishes you, because you then need to go back for more funds and for more loans to do exactly what you've contracted loans to do. If these things are left unchecked, and with the growing frequency and intensity of these climate-induced disasters, our economies will lose decades of development gains. And these are facts, and it's there. So we are seeing the climate crisis as the debt crisis that faces the economies of these countries. Almost a year ago, like Madam has already said, the V20, together with the G7 and additional supporting countries, launched the Global Shield Against Climate Risks. Ghana, as the chair of the V20, has actively been co-shaping the Global Shield Against Climate Risks with the hope to harness a change in pre-arranged and trigger-based financial protection against climate risks to massively reduce vulnerability in our economies. And it is not enough to get the funds when the harm has already been done, but it will pay when you have a pre-arranged kind of thing. Better to even prevent the escalation of any disaster if they were to happen at all. Even though these may be force majeure, but with the intervention of technology, early signals can be sourced, and that can help mitigate the quantum of damage that may occur, particularly the loss of lives. Increasing pre-arranged finance, which disburses quickly and reliably before or just after disasters happen, and expanding instruments of financial protection for governments, communities, businesses, and households can lower the impact of disasters and make our economies more resilient, safeguard sustainable development, and protect lives and livelihoods, as I've said earlier on. The Global Shield aims to ultimately build domestic and regional protection systems for sustainable resourcing of financial and social protection packages to protect our economies and ecosystems. Here we are looking at biodiversity loss, where flora and fauna are lost, giving in to this global warming phenomenon affecting the entire world. Ghana started in-country process, and this I want to give a few insight into what really happened between Germany and Ghana trying to get this global shield on the ground. And we started this in-country process, the multitask shareholder process of the climate global shield in July 2023. With the global shield and GRMA programs in Ghana, we aim to strengthen locally owned risk insights and implement a toolkit of financial instruments that will provide rapid funds when disasters in the country occurs. And Minister just said that it is not something that's going to be handed down to the recipient or the host countries, but something we work collectively and own it. And we're looking at the local situation, the domestication of most of these experiences that developed countries like Germany do have. So that's a very important point to note. Since then, 2 comprehensive workshops were carried out, bringing together stakeholders from relevant ministries, agencies, academia, and civil society as well as bilateral donors and multilateral partners. And the Finance Ministry of Ghana spearheaded this with the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation, of which my outfit, the Environmental Protection Agency, is under, had to lead this interinstitutional stakeholder engagements. And we did have the private sector also participating actively in this endeavor. The process revealed several priority areas. For instance, a pronounced interest in agricultural insurance and the sector's potential for risk mitigation and protection of farmers. Additionally, we found that there is a need to scale up and operationalize existing initiatives. The participating stakeholders also proposed adaptation projects and highlighted the core benefits of these projects when implemented together with trigger-based financing as provided by the Global Shield. Informed by this process, we have submitted a request for concrete financial and technical support elements to the Global Shield, and this I'll take time to enumerate. This point also buttresses the views and the opinions, and of course, quite good so, of the minister, that it is not to re-engineer the wheels, but to consolidate on nation-by-nation case situation, what they have on the ground. So by that, we at the CVF have been able to adapt what we call CPPs, that's the Climate Prosperity Plans. That has underpinning base of the country's developmental agenda, where all the thematic areas of economic activities, including health, education, forestry, environment, energy, infrastructure, are all the pillars that we're looking at. Sourcing out and looking out for concrete climate-smart investments that can help lead us from vulnerability to resilience and finally to prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, it will be interesting to look at some overview of the Global Shield process and request. There have been key outcomes of the Global Shield process in Ghana, as I've said earlier on, together with Germany. First, agricultural insurance interest. There was a pronounced interest in agricultural insurance. Notably, 5 insurance companies expressed a willingness to underwrite grain insurance directly, something that has never happened in our country before. Now, through Global Shield initiatives, we have seen companies coming forward to do this. This enthusiasm underscores the sector's potential risk for mitigation and financial safeguarding for farmers. That has also boosted the government's initiative of providing pension schemes for cocoa farmers that will cushion them in times of old age and difficulties when they are no more in the position to undertake that venture. There had also been enhancement of existing initiatives. A significant focus was placed on scaling up or adequately resourcing existing initiatives. For instance, the Ghana Agricultural Insurance Pool aims to provide premium subsidy support to farmers, and the ARC drought product, developed pre-COVID but not yet operational, were highlighted for potential operationalization with the purchase of insurance policy. The third had to do with the adaptation projects emphasized. In addition to pre-arranged financing projects, the importance of adaptation projects in mitigating loss and damage was recognized. Ministries, departments, and agencies proposed several adaptation projects to enhance climate resilience, demonstrating opportunities for the Global Shield community and partners to mobilize resources for adaptation. That is complementary to trigger-based and pre-arranged financing. Together, Adaptation and prearranged financing can ensure that we have a full shield of protection against accelerating climate impacts. There have been challenges in trying to do some of these things. And the major one that has been obstacle to implementing climate disaster risk financing and insurance in Ghana. These challenges include insufficient funding for program implementation, a lack of accurate climate disaster risk data, and difficulties in creating sustainable insurance products due to our own peculiar and unique challenges such as frequent urban and peri-urban flooding. And you may know, or you might have learned from the news that about 3 months, or no, 3 weeks ago, there was a complete flooding within the lower basin of Akosumbuda, where there is spillage, and we had a lot of people losing properties. Fortunately, there were no lives lost, but the quantum of livelihoods that were lost, that has left women and children, the most vulnerable people in acquire dire consequences, situations. This has occasioned climate-induced human mobility, unplanned. So you can imagine when all of a sudden these things happen to people.
Mr. Kokofu, let's come back maybe to these points after journalists have had a chance to ask questions, if that's okay for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Es gibt jetzt die Gelegenheit für Fragen. Die erste hat
Now there is an opportunity to ask questions. Torsten Holz was the first person to ask questions.
Hallo, hören Sie mich? Ja.
Hello.
Genau, Holz
Can everybody hear me? Right.
Sie haben davon gesprochen, dass die
You
Basis
said
der
that
Geberländer für den Loss and Damage Fonds
the
erweitert werden
donor
soll, über
country
die
base for
traditionellen
the
Geber
Loss and Damage
hinaus.
Fund will
Wenn
go
man sich jetzt
beyond
anguckt,
traditional
wer
donors. Now, if you
aktuell
look at
nachgelegt hat, sind das
who
nur die
has made
traditionellen Geber. Es gibt
commitments
kein anderes
now,
Land außer den
it's only
Emiraten,
traditional donors. There is no other country
das
except
sozusagen
the
nicht ein
Arab
klassisches
Emirates
Industrieland ist.
that is not
Haben Sie dennoch
non-traditional
Hoffnung, dass da
industrialized
noch was
countries that
kommt?
has made a
Bei
pledge. Do you still have
Saudi-Arabien
hope that some countries
und die
will be
ganzen
doing
anderen,
that,
China,
like
die ganzen
Saudi
anderen
Arabia,
Länder, die Sie
China,
im
all
Blick
these
haben,
other
haben ja bisher
countries
nichts
that you were
zugesagt.
thinking
Das
of have
High-Level-Segment
made
ist
no
vorbei.
pledges so far, and the high-level segment is over? Shall I answer directly? Yes.
Ja, es war ja für alle,
Well,
etwas überraschend, dass die
I suppose that it was something of a surprise for everybody, really, that the decision on the fund was taken on day one. We are very glad about that because it lent some dynamism to this conference, some momentum, but you can also see that not all countries were prepared to make a pledge at this point. So I find it very reassuring that within just 2 days, so much money has been raised. And it has become very clear in Henry Kokof's statement that this will not be enough. Far more money will have to be raised. And that is why we are putting our focus, and the pressure at this conference will continue to rise, on adding further donors to the pool, including non-traditional donors, because you have to realize that China, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, United Arab Emirates, all these countries are still considered developing countries, but in some cases they are major emitters. And so I count on these countries, non-traditional donor countries, to make further pledges. The next question comes from this colleague here in the middle. Lisa Pozorska from ARD Broadcasting. How does Germany intend to finance the $100 million for this fund, and can we really afford it at this point? Yes, we have many challenges right now. In addition to to climate change, the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, the consequences of the gas stop from Russia, which is, of course, due to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. So we are faced with many challenges, and I can understand every person who says, "Oh, I'm really fed up with all this. Can we just drop something?" But we have to find solutions. And what Germany is doing here is one important way of boosting solutions to the problems that the world is facing. And we do want to prevent disasters like the flood in the German Ahr Valley, because this doesn't just cost money, it also costs hopes, it costs human lives. A lot has been destroyed, and we want to prevent that. So what we're making is a good investment. We're not stopping our investments in climate action. We haven't stopped this year. We will not stop next year. This is absolutely vital. Not investing would mean even more costs. So, yes, we will raise this money. It has been allocated to my budget. This is not easy, but it's absolutely necessary. Another question? Somebody further up front here?
I'll ask in English because I want to ask you both. Can I get your reaction to the size of the individual contributions that have been made so far? Some activists say they're too small. We should be talking about billions rather than millions. What's your reaction to that?
It is. Today we've been told that we have about $500 million in the fund, which is woefully inadequate. You're talking about billions of dollars of loss and damage out there. But it's good to have a starting point. The traditional funding sources keeps on dwindling. Public funding has been a difficult thing, so I know the people of Germany are also feeling the pinch, the struggle. And the private capital, which is very much available, is interested in mitigating solutions, actions that will yield profit to them. So it is about the same turning around and all that. So, like Madame said, we're looking up to these so-called not developed countries, but they are very heavy emitters to come on board and contribute. This morning, I have suggested that if the world, the developing world, is using close to $1 trillion, more than $1 trillion in subsidizing fossil fuel exploitation per annum, per year, why don't they can at least have that amount, put it in the fund, and get it running? So, yes, we are very much optimistic. But thanks to Germany for having taken this initiative, others will surely have to follow suit. Thank you.
Ich kann das nur unterstützen. Das ist der Anfang innerhalb der
We support this. This is the beginning. Within the first 2 days, a little over 500 million has been raised, and that is far from enough. But the point is to persuade further donors to contribute and to make the fund operational quickly. We need to manage to get the board to take its decisions, because only then will it be possible to spend the money. We have a framework, we have the first money, so now we have to make sure that it will get off the ground to deliver quickly, so that we will have a good foundation on which to mobilize further funding. So we need to get this money, translate this money into action quickly, and the board is important for that. Okay, here's the next question.
Mr. Kokofu, it's mainly a question for you. If I've understood you right, suggested that debt is a form of loss and damage, effectively. Like, for example, like the loans you have to take out. I'm wondering if you could elaborate a bit on that, and if you have any thoughts on what can be done about that side of things. Thank you.
Well, we think the economic crisis and the climate crisis are intertwined. Climate crisis fuels economic crisis. So debt burdens on these developing countries, and I illustrated in those simple terms. So, again, if more than $1 trillion US can be allocated and used per annum to subsidize fossil fuel exploitation, can we say that half of that can go into wiping off the debt burden of these vulnerable countries? 68 countries totaling $530 billion US as their debt portfolio. And just a half of $1 trillion in a year can wipe off this debt burden, so they can start on a clean sheet and give them the footprint for resilience, and then move on to prosperity. These are all workable solutions. So it is up to the world to come out clean and be fully committed to solving this climate financing. within the various space of time, not relying solely on the known world financial architecture. It is slow, it is not easy to assess, and it is not getting to anywhere. Children and women are dying and suffering because of these climate-induced catastrophes. So there are concrete, positive steps that the world can take. Can the world revisit the Marshall Plan after the 1945 war?
Ihre Frage bitte.
Kormaier from Euractiv. Your Excellency, do you think it is just that the EU will soon start levering carbon tariffs on your exports? And do you think just climate finance should be increased as a response?
If I heard you properly, EU being leveraged because of the exports? CEDA.
Cross-border a tax that you need to pay when products come into the EU.
Well, maybe fair economic trade, fair trade policies. Well, that is not the issue. The issue of climate crisis is global, and wherever you find yourself. I've been living in Germany. I know Germany so well. I was very surprised when was it Stuttgart? Hanover. When Hanover, Hauptbahnhof got flooded. I said, wow, it's happening in Germany as well. New York got flooded just recently. So it means climate change and its effects know no bounds. The difference is that these developing countries, Germany and the US, have the resilience and the shocks. The insurance penetration in these countries are nearly to 90%, whereas in the entire of Africa, the insurance penetration is about 4%. So that lands us into the vulnerability and all that. Catastrophes, one way or the other, may happen. Force majeure. It may be accidental, it may be anything. But then what happens thereafter? And then the early warning signals where people can put in preventive measures and all that. That's what we're talking about. So it is not about choose and pick. It is about all of us. But fortunately, we are so close to EU. So any point in time, when we start crying, EU hears us first and better. That's why we are here.
Gibt es weitere Fragen hier im Raum?
Are there any other questions?
Pressemitteilung hinweisen auf unserer Homepage hier zum Thema.
I would like to draw your attention to our press release on our homepage on loss and damage. Dr. Kokofu, Minister, thank you very much. Thank you all for your interest. See you next time.